out here in Yellowstone that come to my talks all the time. Is that better? A little bit closer here.
No, it's worse. Yeah.
Okay?
Get real close.
Man, you guys are like students in my class. There'll be a test afterwards. Okay. I just wanted to point out, because a lot of people in the Salt Lake area view Yellowstone as one of their parks, and a lot of you do go to Yellowstone frequently and have. And I just want to point out this idea, why is it always uphill to Yellowstone? You can't get into Yellowstone without driving uphill. The Snake River Plain through Jackson Hole from Bozeman or Cody. And I'm going to explain why as I address the topics of this great hotspot in the world. I do want to point out that Yellowstone was first formed in, this would be 1872. And this has important implications because F.V. Hayden was the first geologist with the U.S. government who made a lot of surveys of Yellowstone in the 1869, 70, 71. And he based a lot of his work out of Salt Lake City. Because Salt Lake City was the nearest rail hub. And so a lot of their work was done from the Salt Lake area, and they would then go on horseback and buggy to Yellowstone, and you see some of the old maps, and eventually the Congressional Act that made Yellowstone the first national park in the world. Well, my talk is really about the past and the present and the future of Yellowstone. And I'm going to touch on these ideas that I put in here, a little bit about the geologic setting. Then I'll talk a little about shaking and baking. That's when I talk about earthquakes and heat. And then I'll talk about how we make MRI scans of the earth, just like you do in medicine, and talk about the hazards that are therefore related to this giant mantle hotspot. And I'll end up with some personal information at the end of my global experiences that Bob mentioned of. First of all, my presentation is from a career of almost 55 years working in Yellowstone. I started there in 1956, actually fresh out of high school, expecting a release to go to college, knowing that I had a job in Yellowstone, and I was a GS0, I think. It's about as low as you can get. And so I began working in there long before I went to college. And finally, I did start in college, and I experienced the 1959 Hebden Lake earthquake. Now, the Hebden Lake earthquake is the biggest earthquake in the Intermountain region. It's the one we take as the maximum credible earthquake, for example, for Utah. Importantly, the Hebden Lake area has had a lot of Utah roots. A lot of Utah people came in and settled into the West Yellowstone area with not only summer homes, but many of the facilities and restaurants and hotels in West Yellowstone. And I knew a lot of people from the Utah area when I was up there in the 50s. I want to point out my research has been supported by a lot of organizations over the years, principally the National Science Foundation. The Park Service has been great to work with, and the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Utah itself has been very supportive. Over this 57 years of research, I've directed 70 graduate students, which I think is somewhat of a record in our college. And we've written a lot of papers and books on Yellowstone. And the bottom here shows the organizations. I am the director of the Seismology and Active Research Tectonics Group, initiated the University of Utah seismograph stations, Park Service, USGS, NSF, etc. These are all organizations that we pool our resources from to run the operation of monitoring Yellowstone, and I'll show you a little bit about our network into the talk. Well, as I said, Hayden was the first person that really came in to Yellowstone. He was a geologist and educated actually in medicine from Harvard. But in those days, if you wanted to go on from medicine, you went into the science. Well, Ferdinand Hayden came in 1871. Here's some pictures of him and one of these camps actually in the southern Snake River Plain. Picture of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone by Thomas Moran, who assisted and joined Dr. Hayden. And from on top of Mount Washburn in the middle of Yellowstone, there's a picture where Dr. Hayden deduced that the system was in fact a active volcano, and that many of the features we saw, or he saw in Yellowstone, were related to the volcanic action of the Earth. Now, globally, Yellowstone is highly appreciated by principally the 2004 BBC production supervolcano. I prefer to use the term giant volcano in terms of the process. But BBC produced this documentary that was shown globally, and the whole world suddenly viewed Yellowstone as a geologic park. Before that, it was a bison or elk park, or geyser park, fishing park. But it was the recognition that BBC put out in their documentary of Yellowstone as a very active and major volcano that really shed light and brought the influence, if you wish, of the world to Yellowstone as an active geologic feature. And of course, some of you may have seen this. We just finished a production this summer, both for BBC, a new production for BBC and for National Geographic that you'll be seeing next year, follow up on these ideas that BBC started. Much of my work is going to be in their films. Well, what is a hotspot? First of all, hotspots are areas of concentrated volcanism. But I want to start out on the right here. It says the western U.S. has all the elements of plate tectonics. So when you take the Geology 1 course, you find out plate tectonics is the unifying theme in earth science. And it has four components. It has the components of subduction. I can see right here. One diffuse plate is actually diving down beneath the western U.S. It has a transform zone here on the San Andreas Fault. It has a zone of extension, which is the basin range between Salt Lake and Reno. It's pulling apart actively, but up in the northeast end of the Snake River Plain is the Yellowstone Hotspot. And these are the four elements. And normally we see hotspots within oceans. But this hotspot's about 1,000 miles from the west coast. So it gives us some additional prominence and degree of understanding that have driven me into trying to figure out the mechanics and the physics of the system. Now, one of the things that I do and that I teach and that I practice is I integrate information. Because at Yellowstone, everything is interconnected. So here's Yellowstone National Park, as I'll show you the geology of the surface is a volcanic field. But it relates to the ongoing earthquake activity. That relates to ongoing ground deformation caused by magma, which comes from a mantle plume. It produces high heat flow. It creates the hydrothermal features. The important thing here is these are all double arrows. They all interact with one another, and you can't understand one without all of the rest. And so I have put up my career into integrating information in a systematic way to understand the actual physics and the properties of this system. Yellowstone's always moving. It's always shaking and it's always baking. And I plotted here a time series, or a histogram, if you wish, of earthquake activity shown by these bars. That's the number of earthquakes per quartile, starting back in 1970 when we first installed the first seismograph network. And these you can see in red all the way up to the present. And so here's the number of earthquakes per quarter. Don't worry about the numbers. But on the other scale of these lines shows ground motion. We measure ground motion with GPS to the nearest 1 or 2 millimeters with instruments. They're called geodetic grade. They're not the ones you buy at REI. These are $30,000 dual frequency systems, give us very, very high precision. The point being is that Yellowstone had a long period of uplift from 1923 till 1985 when there was a large earthquake swarm. And then the caldera went down, then it went up. And it's going down at less than a half an inch a year, up at less than a half an inch a year, and down. Suddenly it took off in 2004 with this accelerated uplift. And at the top of the uplift was another big earthquake swarm. And then it went down. So Yellowstone does go up and down, and it has these active seismicity that's concurrent with the deformation. So the processes we want to understand is this. We're sitting on the North American plate, and the North American plate is moving to the southwest. All of North America is moving southwesterly at 1 inch per year. It's plate tectonics. Beneath the North American plate, there's a mantle plume that's fixed, and it sends magma to the surface, and I'm going to show you more pictures of it. And the first eruptive components of the Yellowstone system are down here in northern Nevada, within the McDermott Field. So the ages of these these are groups of supervolcanic eruptions, are shown in millions of years. 16, 16, 14, 12, 11, 10, 6, 7, 4, on the Yellowstone, 2 million, 1.2, and 0.6 million years. So you can see the time progression up the Snake River Plain as the plate moved over the hotspot. There's a bow wave-like zone at the edges. Think about driving your boat through Bear Lake or Great Salt Lake, you have a bow wave. The Earth has the same effect. It's moving across a subducted medium or plastic medium in the upper mantle that's plastic. So it increases the stress around this area, this tectonic parabola. And I've shown here in red all the earthquakes that I plotted from 1970 to the present. And you can see the high topography also surrounds this region. Here's the Wasatch up in the Bear Lake, Star Valley. Here's the Teton Fault. Notice the lack of earthquakes there. Yellowstone is the highest concentration of seismicity, and I'll go into that later, and earthquakes that fell off toward the Boar Peak area of central Idaho. This is the Yellowstone tectonic parabola. Well, what is a volcanic eruption? You probably haven't really witnessed them. I haven't seen too many up close, but here's a couple that have occurred in the not too distant future. For example, Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, and you can see this was an explosive eruption on the north flank of Mount St. Helens, and it extruded 0.3 cubic kilometers of ash and magma. Now, the mud flows that were produced came down the valley of Spirit Lake in the Toutle Valley of Washington, Oregon, killed 60 people, and it was a tremendous thing. In 1991, we had a large volcanic eruption in the Philippines, and you can see there, this is Mount Pinatubo, there's the north flank, there's the south flank, it just blew the whole top of the mountain away. This is the eruption that put ash all over the Philippines, including covering Clark Air Force Base, which they had to close because of this particular eruption. Importantly, over 700 people were killed, dominantly from the ash flows, pyroclastic flows. Now, typically, Yellowstone eruptions, that is not the super eruptions, about 5 to 10 times larger than the Pinatubo eruption. So to give you an idea of scale, this is what they might look like. To give you another idea of scale, on the left, I plotted by volume. Here's Mount St. Helens, Mount Pinatubo, Krakatoa, Southwest Pacific, getting larger, Tambora, and South Pacific. And here are the 3 giant Yellowstone eruptions. The biggest one is 2 million years ago, created the Yellowstone caldera. Then there was a caldera eruption at Island Park, above Streamwire Lake Fish, 67 cubic miles, and finally the latest and youngest 640,000-year-old caldera that's, you can see, 240 cubic miles. There's about 8,000 cubic, 6,000 cubic miles of total volumetric explosions that came out dominantly in ash. And this is a map of the ashes that were exploded from Yellowstone. So this darker color pattern, which got covered up by the younger one, is this big one right here. And here's the youngest one. This lighter tan is this one right here. And here's Mount St. Helens. It's distributed about a millimeter of ash in Yellowstone itself. But the ashes here, we think were as deep as 40 to 50 meters under 200 feet in Yellowstone at the time of the eruptions. Here's a diagrammatic view of these 3 super eruptions of Yellowstone. The first one right here was the giant eruption 2 million years ago. It was the Island Park which we now call it the Henry Fort caldera, 1.4 million years ago. And finally, 640,000 years ago in red was the final giant eruption which formed the Yellowstone caldera. Now, you have heard a lot about these numbers on television because the press likes to say we've had 3 giant eruptions. The time between eruptions is called the inter-event time. 800,000 years, 600,000 years, 640,000 years. The average inter-event time is 740,000 years. So, wow, we're okay. We have 70,000 years to go. We're safe. This is nonsense. Because a lot of you people are in the stock market business. We only have 2 inter-event times upon which to calculate a statistic. We just have 2 numbers. We have no idea where we are in the cyclic or the acyclic pattern of these giant eruptions. So we certainly don't have enough information to say how close we are to the next super eruption. And don't let CBS or ABC tell you they're different, because I just heard it the other night. Oh, we're right in the repeat time of the next big eruption. Well, no, we're not. We don't know where we are. Well, Yellowstone probably started out looking like this in the early caldera formation, and I just made these diagrammatic views up. Looking to the southwest would have been the Teton Range. There have been some early eruptions around an old caldera, the Allison Range. They're relatively continuous. Here's the Serica Range, here's Yellowstone Lake. And there were eruptions that were coming out of the bottom of the caldera. Then we had this catastrophic eruption, and this would have been the 640,000 year eruption, where magma came out of the ring fracture zone around the edges and ejected aerosols of ash would rise as high as 60 to 80,000 feet. And these eruptions could have lasted 4 days to weeks, maybe even months. And then when it all quiets down, what we have left is our volcanic flows around the edges of the caldera as young as 70,000 years ago on the south side of the caldera. And we have the central portion of the caldera that actually dropped down and sunk because it lost its roof support with all the extruding magma and ash that went into the atmosphere. So this is just close-up view of some of the features. If you drive to the Madison Junction area right here, and this is a picture on the lower right of Madison Junction, and this is the road that comes right up here to Old Faithful. This is the road that goes to North Basin. But see here, that is the edge of the caldera number 2, and there is the plateau behind it. It's flat. So the center here dropped down about 1,000 to 1,500 feet when the last caldera erupted. Now the very first caldera boundary is clear up here and cuts off what they call the Gallatin Range about 20 miles north. And it cut this mountain range right off when it first went off. And if you guys are fishing the fire hole, which I know a lot of you like to do, this is one of these famous fishing places, go to the parking lot, and instead of going fishing, look right behind your car, and you'll see these outcrops of rhyolite magma that was solidified into these welded tufts. And you can see the streaming nature. You can see the actual fluid-like pattern, like syrup coming out of or molasses on top of magma that is older and colder and vegetated and broken up. And here's another layer and another layer. These are exposures in the Firehole Canyon that you will drive past when you drive on the way into Old Faithful. Now I'm going to ask you this question again. Why is it uphill to Yellowstone? Keep that in mind. Well, in 1870, following the Hayden expedition, a lieutenant from the Army was on the east side of Yellowstone Lake. Actually, he was up around Mount Washburn. But I'm up here on the east side of Yellowstone Lake, looking into Yellowstone to the west. Here's Yellowstone Lake. And this would be the edge of the caldera on the east side of Yellowstone Lake. Here's the Elephant Back Fault Zone, and the Yellowstone Hotel is right here, Fishing Bridge is right here. And so, as this lieutenant said, the entire basin may be obtained with mountains surrounding it on every side. The Great Basin was formerly one vast crater. If it might, it might be filled or called one vast crater out of which the fluid interior of the earth, fragments of rocks and volcanic dust poured in unlimited quantities. This gentleman knew what had happened. He just didn't know he was standing on the edge of a caldera. So there was a good perception by these early naturalists, as they were called, who came into this country in the mid-1800s. Well, how do these things work? I've drawn here a map that shows in black all the faults that come over out of the Teton region, south out of Montana. And I've shown here in these stars, these are the youngest volcanic flows. That is since the last super eruption. They're from 640,000 years to about 150,000 years, and the youngest one 70,000 years. But notice the alignment, northwest. I'm going to show you parallel some of the earthquakes. This is my idea of actually what a hydrothermal system is. Hydrothermal features mean geysers and fumaroles and hot springs. And what we think is, and these geysers and fumaroles and hot springs are shown in red patterns here. These are where all the geyser systems, hot spring systems of Yellowstone are, and they're dominantly within and around the caldera. So we think the upper few thousand feet basically lift fractured rhyolite rock. Heat is coming from down here. I'll show you off the magma body. We heat superheat water in a layer that's highly saline, and it has a lot of salt, so it's more dense than the fresh phreatic water that comes, the water that comes from this annual rainfall and snowfall. So this layer of hot fluids heats this next layer of hot fluid, and that's where the geyser reservoirs are located. Well, in 1888, probably the largest eruption of Yellowstone occurred. Now, people weren't there with cameras, but they were there, and they actually witnessed this giant eruption of Excelsior, which is just down the road from Old Faithful. And this giant eruption created a chasm about 100 feet wide. It's about 10 to 15 feet deep, and this is an artist's depiction of the person who was there, actually saw it. And this would have been the last giant geyser of Yellowstone, and it blew itself apart and is no longer active because, of course, it destroyed itself. But here's what they look like today, and of course, Old Faithful, where we get 100 feet of jetting water with hot steam and mist. Here's Guardian Geyser, Beehive Geyser that erupt rather continuously. This is what people come to see. They're the icon of Yellowstone. What is related to these things is that geysers have to have earthquakes. And I'm showing you a picture looking into, this is Old Faithful. In fact, Old Faithful's been erupting right there when I took that picture. It was in 1984. It was in February. It was 50 below zero in the airplane. And I'm looking into what's called a little dome here, a mountain that's capped with a little fresh snow. That's called the Mallard Lake Resurgent Dome. And it's like a piston over a magma chamber that's risen up in the past 100,000 years. And it has a fracture that goes to the middle right here, looking toward the east. And this fracture comes down, and along the fracture, where we've broken up all the rock, you have that Excelsior geyser that blew up in 1888 is right here, and here's Grand Prismatic and other ones. In other words, earthquakes, the shaking keeps these passageways open, keeps them from closing with mineralization, and without earthquakes, we wouldn't have geysers. Well, this is a rare eruption of Steamboat Geyser now, the largest geyser in the world. And I took it in 1984. It's 150 meters high. And you can see the bottom part is high velocity jets coming up, and then very dense steam, and then a light mist. I had been flying, and I had 6 pounds of fuel left. I'm a pilot. But I had a National Geographic photographer with me. He had shot 30 rolls, and he was out of film. And I saw this thing, and I thought, oh, it must be a fire. So I flew over. I said, we got to turn. We've got to get to a Yellowstone and get some fuel. And that's what we witnessed. It's the only aerial picture of the world's tallest geyser. Now, Here's the important thing. I calculated the probability of me taking that picture. 1 in 20 million. That's the same as winning the Powerball lottery, right? I just won the Powerball lottery for Yellowstone. Yellowstone, of course, has a tremendous display of the effects of heat, but it's not a hot place. It's a high mountainous plateau. But it follows on the edge. Here's the Snake River Plain from Idaho up to Yellowstone. And red is showing you the actual heat flux, not temperature, but the rate of which heat comes out of the ground. We measure it in milliwatts per square meter, which means in 1 square meter, we have, or 1 square yard, we have so much heat coming out of the ground. Well, Yellowstone is so hot, or has so much heat coming out, that it's enough to electrify a modern city. It produces 60 gigawatts of energy, and it's produced by magmas that are crystallizing, they're cooling as they come out. Right at Yellowstone itself, I put in the heat flow values. These numbers are like 30,000, they're 40 to 50,000. The normal is 80. Oh. We made some heat flow measurements by taking a boat out here, and we measured the water temperature and the heat temperature. I'm just going to show you some that say that even at 3 or 4 meters depth, we're at 90 to 100 degrees centigrade. We're boiling. That's how hot Yellowstone Lake is. Well, it was so hot that old Jim Bridger said the river raced downfield so fast it turned the water warm. No, it came close. It was warm, but it wasn't from that. Well, I was up there again in 2009 leading a field trip, and look what happened right behind my back. An explosion 20 feet from me. I heard the blast. I turned around. I thought I should run and save my companions. Fortunately, it stopped. So I've experienced one of these firsthand. I'll hurry on here, except to say the chances of me taking this picture is 1 in 1 million. Again, Powerball lottery scale. Well, Ferdinand Hayden was here in 1871, and he called north end of Yellowstone Lake earthquake camp. And we now operate a network of 35 seismographs and 35 GPS stations that are all monitored, send the data in real time to the University of Utah, where we record them, we broadcast them, and they're all available to the public in real time. This is a map showing the distribution of earthquakes in Yellowstone, 1972 to 2013. There's the Hebden Lake area. Then these earthquakes align themselves much in the same pattern I showed you as these stars right here, which are the post-volcanic vents. So there's an interrelationship between the volcanism and the magmatism. Well, this was that 1973 Hebden Lake earthquake I mentioned. And you can see the fault start is 22 feet high. That's actually 3 geologists high. And that's the kind of earthquake that would occur on the Teton Fault on 13th East, if you wish. And that's what happened to the roads. Of course, we had tremendous avalanches, rock slides, and a huge one produced the Madison Canyon slide. It's really the largest Western U.S. historic earthquake. Well, here it is again, and I'm going to show you some information, though, related to CAT scans. I wrote papers in the 70s about the actual methodology of making seismic tomography before the medics got onto it. They caught on to some of our ideas that we published in '63. That is, if you have an earthquake over here and you send seismic waves through the earth up here and record them, you can reconstruct what the structure looks like they went through. So here's a CAT scan of you know who. Well, I'm going to do a CAT scan of of the Earth. And here's the one we just published last year. These are CAT scans. I'll show you the bottom picture here, a cross section of the upper 15 kilometers. In red means the rock is hot and low velocity. This is a magma body, shallow as 5 to 6 kilometers, and gets shallowest to the northeast, clear up here on the northeast side of Yellowstone. And this is the first real image of a Yellowstone magma system. This magma system is 2.5 times larger than we previously imaged.
it has enough melt to fill the Grand Canyon halfway full of molten rock. That's the size. Well, I'll hurry along here. I worked there in 1956 at the south end of the lake, and I'm showing you pictures of the south end of Peel Island. I'm going to show you a cutaway. Is if we have a lake that's tilted down to the south. See all the trees here? They're all dying. They're dying because there was a large uplift to the north end of the lake that tilted the body back. It's the bathtub ring effect. Tilt the bathtub, and as the bathtub goes underwater, one comes out. North end comes out of water, the south end goes under. That's how we kill the trees. So we started making measurements of it, and here's what we discovered. In 1977, we made measurements from the old benchmarks. We found that Yellowstone had risen, and that's a good contour of it. 3/4 of a meter in 50 years. This much. Now, nowhere else in the world had seen these kind of things. And then GPS came along, and we can do GPS to a few millimeters, so the width of your fingernail now. Well, here I'm doing GPS in the backcountry, portable GPS unit, it's helicopter supported. And what we found was this pattern of uplift and subsidence. 87 to 95, we had subsidence, and the next period was uplift and subsidence. So this caldera was going up and down. I'll hurry on here. This is what we discovered in that 2004 and 2009. This accelerated uplift really got us excited, published a paper in Science, sorry, and this is what we discovered. The whole area of Yellowstone was undergoing uplift in a pattern that was even bigger than Teton Park. Let me move on here. I want to show you the latest ones. I'll skip that. This is the paper that just came out in June. This paper on the Yellowstone magmatic system has been described on 1,500 media links around the world. It's the latest image of the whole Yellowstone system. We used earthquakes shown in red, stations in blue, and we made these pie slices, if you wish. And what we found, where it's red, it's hot rock, where it's blue, it's cold rock, and you can see the shallowest portion is very hot here, 2 to 3 kilometers beneath the caldera, going deeper and deeper and deeper. What we discovered was it not only going deeper, it was tilting down to the northwest to a depth of at least 100 kilometers. I'm just wrapping it up here. So we have this upper crustal magma chamber, and we have magma going down beneath northern Montana and Idaho. This is what the body looks like. So we now know there's a mantle plume, basaltic melt, and this rhyolite melt. All three are working together. So we have now a double whammy. Last year we had a single whammy. We now have this basaltic body that's 4 times bigger than the shallow one. So let me just conclude by saying, we know that magma comes from deep in the earth, 1,000 kilometers, and it's like a plume of smoke from a cigarette going up through the mantle. Let me just show you what are good things and bad things. If you've been in Yellowstone, you're on what's called the per azimuth depth of earthquake probability, namely high probability of earthquakes. And if you compare it to volcanoes, here's the actual probabilities. Look on the right. Caldera forming eruptions are small. Post-caldera forming eruptions are small. Hydrothermal eruptions are small. But earthquakes are huge. The risk in Yellowstone are earthquakes, not volcanoes. That's the take-home story. And I'll finish off here by showing you a picture of our 3-dimensional image of this discovered plume body and now upper and lower mantle magma bodies. And with that, I will stop here and just say thanks.
I know we all want to have Bob keep going, but we do need to wrap up. Bob, we're going to have you sign a book for the kids at Franklin Elementary, Global Warming. I think that's apropos. And we are adjourned. Please run out to to the lobby so we can get that picture?
And I'll sign it.
Okay, please do.
Don't we have my regards?
Sure. That would be great.
It was good. I wish he could have had 3 hours instead of 30 minutes.
There's a lot. There you go. Over there.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Please join us. Come
Oh,
on, put on your t-shirt. Come on
Oh,
out. Get a picture.
I'll just take this apart because I've got another meeting.
I know some of you really need to run to the office, so I want to encourage everyone to move as quickly as possible to the lobby.
Harbor fields you see throughout Idaho. Is that from the Yellowstone?
Yeah, that's Yellowstone. It's up to see if we're playing. That's how old Yellowstone is.
Overwhelming.
This was pretty impressive, isn't it?
It is indeed.
So statistical probability of the caldera is
Yeah, of the caldera eruption is 0.00014% per year.
pretty small.
Very small, but the probability for a big earthquake is point.
And if one goes off up there, a big enough one, it could affect the Wasatch Front.
Oh, absolutely. And the Wasatch would affect Yellowstone. And we've got paper just coming out where we're calculating the stress propagation from Yellowstone to the whole Intermountain region to the south and from the south to the north. Yeah, everything is interrelated here.
So statistical probability of a 7.0 plus earthquake in Wasatch Front, I've heard that in the next 50 years it's actually pretty high.
Yeah, the next 50 years, the Wasatch is like 30%.
Yeah.
And the Teton's about 80%.
Wow.
Teton fault's actually loading at a much higher rate.
Uh-huh. Fascinating. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing.
Well done. Oh, super. I left out my gory stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's this is all here. That's all mine. Oh, my briefcase. I do it. I was going to show you much my hand on. Well, they were a little late getting started. Well, you guys do great work. I'm happy to help you.
Yeah. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. Glad we got it figured out.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
You know, I give talks all over the world, and my biggest fear, my biggest concern always is, do the electronics work for all of our machines? Hey, I'll wait for you. I'll get your picture. Oh, I think they've got plenty out there. No, they want you in it. Boy, when you said the Joseph Smith building, I thought, where the hell's that? I called my wife and she said, oh, that's Hotel Utah.
Well, and it's the Empire Room, and it's one of the few that they didn't change. This is still the Empire Room. This is,
It's gorgeous.
oh, this is a fine room.
My grandson had his wedding reception here 2 years ago. No, I'm familiar with it. I think that, oh, I need that.
Did you guys want to take any extra meals extra for the NPCs? Do you guys want to box them, or
I'm sorry?
do you want us to box the extra meals?
Let me get someone
Or,
to answer that.
okay, yeah, no problem, whenever.
Okay.
Just across the hall.
They said no.
Okay, perfect.
They're yours.
Thanks. Want lunch today or no? Okay. Oh, well, then you should. Yeah.